save one, who looked thereon with eye severe, and with calm planted steps walked in austere. 'Twas Apollonius. Something too he laughed, as though some knotty problem that had daft his patient thought had now begun to thaw and solve and melt. 'Twas just as he foresaw. He met within the murmurous vestibule his young disciple. "'Tis no common rule, Lycius," said he, "for uninvited guest to force himself upon you, and infest with an unbidden presence the bright throng of younger friends. Yet must I do this wrong, and you forgive me." Lycius blushed, and led the old man through the inner doors broad spread, with reconciling words and courteous mien, turning into sweet milk the sophist spleen. Of wealthy lustre was the banquet room, filled with pervading brilliance and perfume. Before each lucid panel fuming stood a censer fed with myrrh and spiced wood, each by a sacred tripod held aloft, whose slender feet wide swerved upon the soft wool-woofed carpets. 50 wreaths of smoke from 50 censers their light voyage took to the high roof, still mimicked as they rose along the mirrored walls by twin clouds odorous. 12 sphered tables, by silk seats ensphered, high as the level of a man's breast reared on Liberd's paws, upheld the heavy gold of cups and goblets, and the store thrice told of Ceres' horn. And in huge vessels wine came from the gloomy tun with merry shine. Thus loaded with a feast the tables stood, each shrining in the midst the image of a god. When in an antechamber every guest had felt the cold full sponge to pleasure pressed by ministering slaves upon his hands and feet, and fragrant oils with ceremony meet poured on his hair, they all moved to the feast in white robes, and themselves in order placed around the silken couches, wondering whence all this mighty cost and blaze of wealth could spring. Soft went the music the soft air along, while fluent Greek a voweled undersong kept up among the guests, discoursing low at first, for scarcely was the wine at flow. But when the happy vintage touched their brains, louder they talk, and louder came the strains of powerful instruments. The gorgeous dyes, the space, the splendor of the draperies, the roof of awful richness, nectarous cheer, beautiful slaves, and Lamia's self appear. Now when the wine has done its rosy deed, and every soul from human trammels freed, no more so strange. For merry wine, sweet wine, will make Elysian shades not too fair, too divine. Soon was god Bacchus at meridian height. Flushed were their cheeks and bright eyes double bright. Garlands of every green and every scent from vales deflowered, or forest trees branch rent, in baskets of bright osier gold were brought, high as the handles heaped to suit the thought of every guest, that each, as he did please, might fancy fit his brows, silk-pillowed at his ease. What wreath for Lamia? What for Lycius? What for the sage, old Apollonius? Upon her aching forehead be there hung the leaves of willow and of adder's tongue. And for the youth, quick let us strip for him the thyrsus, that his watching eyes may swim into forgetfulness. And for the sage, let spear-grass and the spiteful thistle wage war on his temples. Do not all charms fly at the mere touch of cold philosophy? There was an awful rainbow once in heaven. We know her woof, her texture, she is given in the dull catalogue of common things. Philosophy will clip an angel's wings, conquer all mysteries by rule and line, empty the haunted air and nomad mine, unweave a rainbow, as it erewhile made the tender-personed Lamia melt into a shade. By her glad Lycius sitting in chief place, scarce saw in all the room another face, till, checking his love trance, a cup he took, full brimmed, and opposite sent forth a look, 'cross the broad table, to beseech a glance from his old teacher's wrinkled countenance, and pledge him. The bald-head philosopher had fixed his eye, without a twinkle or stir, full on the alarmed beauty of the bride, brow-beating her fair form, and troubling her sweet pride. Lycius then pressed her hand with devout touch, as pale it lay upon the rosy couch. 'Twas icy, and the cold ran through his veins. Then sudden it grew hot, and all the pains of an unnatural heat shot to his heart. "Lamia, what means this? Wherefore dost thou start? Knowest thou that man?" Poor Lamia answered not. He gazed into her eyes, and not a jot owned they the love-lorn piteous appeal. More he gazed, his human senses reel, some hungry spell that loveliness absorbs. There was no recognition in those orbs. "Lamia!" he cried, and no soft-toned reply. The many heard, and the loud revelry grew hush. The stately music no more breathes, the myrtle sickened in 1,000 wreaths. By faint degrees, voice, lute, and pleasure ceased. A deadly silence step by step increased, until it seemed a horrid presence there, and not a man but felt the terror in his hair. "Lamia!" he shrieked, and nothing but the shriek with its sad echo did the silence break. "Begone, foul dream!" he cried, gazing again in the bride's face, where now no azure vein wandered on fair spaced temples, no soft bloom misted the cheek, no passion to illume the deep recessed vision. All was blight. Lamia, no longer fair, there sat a deadly white. Shut those juggling eyes, thou ruthless man! Turn them aside, wretch, or the righteous ban Of all the gods whose dreadful images Here represent their shadowy presences May pierce them on the sudden with the thorn Of painful blindness, leaving thee forlorn In trembling dotage to the feeblest fright Of conscience, for their long offended might, For all thine impious, proud heart's sophistries, Unlawful magic, and enticing lies. Corinthians, look upon that gray-beard wretch! Mark how possessed his lashless eyelids stretch Around his demon eyes. Corinthians, see! My sweet bride withers at their potency." "Fool!" said the sophist in an undertone, Gruff with contempt, which a death-nigh moan From Lycius answered, as heart-struck and lost, He sank supine beside the aching ghost. "Fool, fool!" repeated he, while his eyes Still relented not, nor moved. "From every ill of life have I preserved thee to this day, And shall I see thee made a serpent's prey?" Then Lamia breathed death breath. The sophist's eye, like a sharp spear, Went through her utterly, keen, cruel, prescient, stinging. She, as well as her weak hand could any meaning tell, Motioned him to be silent. Vainly so. He looked and looked again, a level "No." "A serpent!" echoed he. No sooner said, than with a frightful scream She vanished, and Lycius' arms were empty of delight, As were his limbs of life from that same night. On the high couch he lay. His friends came round, supported him. No pulse or breath they found, and in its marriage robe the heavy body wound. End of Part 2 of Lamia by John Keats. Recording by Leonard Wilson of Springfield, Ohio.